October 16th Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. I'm joined today by Linda Munn and Oren Glick, and I myself, Carol Zacharias, to the chairman of the zoning board, and of course with the able advice of Alex Wallach, our planning advisor, and Lisa Rickmears may be joining us. We will see how that goes. With that, this is a working session where we're not going to be hearing the presentation of any new cases. We're going to be discussing various matters amongst ourselves. Having said that, on the agenda there are numerous cases. Those cases were quite intentionally set over for the next board meeting on November the 4th. Accordingly, if you'll take
November 6th?
November 6th, sorry. So the cases are indicated on the agenda as put over for a public hearing, either adjourned or to commence on November 6th, and we will stick with that. There are two other cases that are environmental cases that we will deal with if Linda is able to make it. Otherwise, that will also be addressed on November 6th. Oh, Brian, great. Hello, Brian. We just started. All right.
Oh, you can't hear us.
We can't hear you. Hold on. We're going to get the audio going. Well, now we can do attorney-client privilege and go into executive session.
Yeah, that you'd have to do an exec session because they'd have to shut down the recording.
But we can put anything we want over to that portion. Okay, that's good to know. All right, so we're waiting for the audio, so everyone stay tuned. We're waiting to get audio addressed
So
for
would you
the
like
video.
Lisa to join? Because she can.
She can?
Yes.
To approve those two cases?
Yes.
Sure. So I suggest that we put the discussion of precedent off until the executive session. We get the advice of counsel on the use and application of precedent. Is that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. No?
Yeah, we can talk about it in the work session, right? We just don't talk
Absolutely.
about not
Yes.
case specific.
But yeah, the
Right,
case
just kinda
specific.
not
and
case specific
I may
and
have some other
name
things I want to
specific.
ask that are
Okay,
sensitive.
someone just
I don't want the discussion of precedent to be precedent.
that on itself. Okay.
All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay.
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Perfect. Yes, I can.
Awesome. All right. So we already opened the meeting. It's just a working session meeting. We are going to be going into executive session at the end to talk about potential alternate board members and anything else at the end that would be where we need the advice of counsel. We would love to have the discussion there in the executive session as well, getting your advice as counsel. My question to you is, I know that you're traveling. Are you going to be available for this entire meeting or not?
It depends how long it goes.
Okay, all right, let's see what happens on that, okay?
I should be good. It's, what is it, 4:15 now? I should be good for another hour and a quarter.
Okay, so we'll see how this goes, but just so you know, that's sort of the big picture, and let's see how it goes. If we do it on November 4, we do it on November 4. Okay, with that in mind, as I said, there are numerous cases that are public hearings that have been adjourned to November 6 or that are scheduled for November 6, and those are adequately noted in the record and the agenda, so we don't need to list them all now. Please see the agenda for those.
And Lisa says she's in, so if we can promote her to panelist, maybe we could go over the draft permit she's created for some of the cases where the public hearings have been closed.
Absolutely. So we have two of those, and when Lisa joins, we'll go through each of those. It's right before the zoning tables tab.
Yep, it should be on page 4 or 5 of the agenda. I think every application listed on that page has been closed. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Are you able to hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay, great. So would it be helpful if maybe Lisa would just walk through the draft decisions that you have for...
The two decisions.
Yep, so the first one is 44 First Neck Lane, number 3190, Cascante.
Thanks, Lisa. If you could do that, it'd be great. We've got your two decisions to look at while you're chatting.
Sure. So I'm just going to pull them up for myself here. So we're going to do the Cascante first. So that one you'll recall was a dock installation, as well as in the last meeting they came and they provided a much more increased wetlands landscaping plan, which was something the board had requested. So they're proposing to do a mitigation of the Phragmites along the wetland buffer, and we'll be adding a series of wetland plantings that will go in along that area. And they're going to restore, I think this was maybe in their original plan from a couple of years ago, but restore some of those meadow grasses in the middle of that lawn within the setback area as well. The permit has already received, they already have they already have their permit from the trustees of the freeholders for the dock, and the dock itself meets the standards of having that 60% light passage to allow for the plants underneath to continue to grow. So it's the last hearing, the hearing was closed. The application was deemed complete, and I prepared the permit with the standard conditions that are on there related to construction timelines and annual reports regarding the revegetation process.
Right.
And Lisa, I believe this is for SECRA type 2 action, so there's no environmental review necessary?
Yes, so if you recall, the previously there was a line in the village, there was a section of the village code which promoted all wetlands permits to be type 1 actions. The Board of Trustees changed that element of the village code back in I think it was September 15th. So they're no longer elevated within the village code to type 1 actions. Under standard seeker legislation, this would be a type 2 action requiring no further environmental review. It's a combination of landscaping and existing residents, as well as a construction of less than 4,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Does anyone have any comments or questions on it? I can jump in. So I really thought that the extensive mitigation, restoration, revegetation that they came back with was very impressive and much needed. And I think, of course, the dock adequately meets the applicable standards. I took a look at the permit earlier, and the permit that Lisa so beautifully drafted reflects that in much greater detail as far as the reasons, and it notes the special conditions that we would want to apply for the work that's going to be done. And for all those reasons, I think that I would definitely approve the permit. What do you all think?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed? All right.
So for that, if somebody wants to make a motion, we have a quorum, so you could approve it tonight,
Oh,
if
perfect.
everyone is in agreement.
Do I hear a motion to move to vote? Sure.
Well,
What you
it
do?
would be a motion to adopt the decision as
Do you
drafted.
go right there? Okay. All those, do I hear a motion to adopt the permit as proposed?
Yes, I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
3, so
and there are no nays.
Carol, Linda,
Great, and I have a clean copy for you to sign that we can file with the clerk.
Okay, we can do that afterwards.
Yep.
All right, so Lisa, well, we move on to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, 10 Squabble Lane, we heard this one last week, and if you recall, this was a pretty simple one. They were actually looking to just, there's 2 properties adjacent to each other. They're looking to build a crushed stone pathway through the lawn area that is within the wetland setback on that property. It doesn't, the path as proposed won't disturb any existing wetlands vegetation. It's going entirely in the area that already is occupied by lawn. It will help facilitate landscaping and maintenance of that area, which does have an existing permit for Phragmites management. So it'll have that added benefit, and also in the neighboring property, which I think is under joint ownership, they have a existing path that's just going to kind of continue around both properties. So this one really didn't come as well. It's in that regulated area of the wetland setback. It's not actually actively disturbing existing wetlands land, and is pretty non-invasive with a crushed stone pathway that's a permeable pathway. It also is a type 2 action under seeker. The construction or expansion of minor or accessory opportunity structures, residential structures, that doesn't require any further environmental review. The special conditions imposed are consistent with those that are standardly imposed, that the actual work match that's proposed in the plan, that the construction follows those plans, and that, that the standard mitigations, avoiding extended construction impacts, limiting noise and traffic, and cleaning up debris, be part of this process. So this was a pretty straightforward and simple one.
All right. Any comments on this one?
Straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. Do I hear a motion to approve the permit?
Motion.
As drafted? All those in favor?
What, second?
Oh, sorry, second? Second?
Yes.
Warren?
Thanks,
All
Warren.
those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Alright,
great.
the
So that
permit's
one
approved.
is adopted as well.
All right.
Okay.
So now we move on to our educational session.
Was there anything else that we wanted Lisa for? I know there's one
Oh,
other
sure.
closed case, but I don't think we have a decision prepared for that.
That's correct. At least there's the hybrid case where there's part variance and part U, and I think that we have to wait for Brian to put this together, correct?
Yeah, so
Yes.
that one has, is within the CHA line, but also has 2 residential setback variances. So, I can, Brian and I can coordinate so that the decision is prepared for the next meeting.
All right. Is that all right with you, Brian?
Perfect.
It's a hybrid. All right. Great. Thank you.
Great. And then, Brian, I think you'll coordinate with the board about a decision for 96 Edwards Lane. I think that was the other case that's
Oh,
closed.
sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, I sent, and unfortunately, as I let the board know, the night of our meeting, after our meeting ended last week, my mother-in-law passed away, so I've been catching up on things. But I did send around, and you probably haven't had a chance to review it, the 96 Edwards Lane decision earlier this afternoon. But if you haven't reviewed it, there's no rush to do anything tonight. You can do it at the next meeting in a couple of weeks.
Let's do that then.
Okay, great.
Thank you, and I'm very sorry to
Sorry
hear
there,
about your
Brian.
loss.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
It's terrible. All right. All right, so does that take care of all the cases?
Yeah, I think unless the board has any questions about anything else that's on any cases, I think that's everything. Most of them are carried over to the next meeting,
Right.
and we've approved the ones that we can that are closed out for tonight.
Good, okay. All right, so let's go on to the educational agenda. Do you want to kick it off with what you provided to us? Because there are some things here I'm not sure what to do with in
Sure.
the beginning, the
Yep.
zoning and so on.
Yep. So first things first, at the end of the agenda, you have a copy of the draft 2026 calendar.
Yeah.
So that's for your review. And so one of the things that we will ask the board to do probably soon, towards the end of the year, is to adopt a calendar, at least for the beginning months, because our deadlines happen almost a month before the meeting. We're soon going to be scheduling things for November and December and beyond, if you can believe it. Right. So I think what the board has been doing is having one public hearing a month. We've reserved the first and third Thursday of the month. If the board wants to have that third Thursday as a work session, that's an option. You could also have a combined hearing work session, depending on what your caseload is like. But those are the dates for your review. The only one where there's a conflict is January 1st, obviously New Year's Day. This building is closed. So if we wanted to have a meeting in January, it would probably have to be the 15th.
Right.
But there's no other conflicts that I noted except for the first meeting in April, I think falls on the second night of Passover. So I'm not available for that one, but feel free to check against your schedules and let us know how you'd like to proceed going forward.
Okay, so,
Where is that sheet?
You have that
coming up.
after the,
In there, in the
yeah,
book?
so after your agenda and after
After the agenda.
after the decisions. Yep, it should be the last page in that section before the divider. Keep going after that one. Yep, there it is.
Thank you.
Sure.
so if everybody could look at this and see if you have conflicts, so we can talk about it on November 6th and make sure we have quorums. Obviously, things will change during the year, but that's a shot. And also think about whether you want to pre-schedule any working sessions. Should we do it once a quarter? Plan one every 6 months? That kind of thing. So think about your conflicts and working sessions, and we'll talk about it.
As it is right now, we have it set up where there is they've framed out a work session every month, right? Right? If you look at every month, there's a work
Well,
session.
the
and
asterisk, yes, but we don't have to do it every single month, right? Do
Yeah.
we want to do it quarterly? Do we
Right.
want to do it every 6 months? But that Thursday, the second Third Thursday of every month is available, yes. But the question is, how often do we really want to do it?
Right.
I thought we talked about Tuesday nights. Is that?
No,
No?
Thursdays.
Always Thursday, okay.
Conflict with the room and all kinds of other things.
Okay.
So as it is right now, here, we own Thursdays, third week of the month and first.
Yep, there's no
Correct.
other board that's in the room at that
Oh,
time.
that's what I mean.
Yep.
So
Correct.
that's our real estate.
Right, that's it's our space.
It's our space.
Now, if we want to peel back on some of the
then
working
we- yeah.
sessions on the third week, we
Okay.
can.
Okay.
But that's something for us to think about now.
Okay.
Yeah, and you could also schedule it, and if you find that there's not enough cases or discussion items to warrant it, you could let us know, and we could always make a note that they're canceled.
I'm thinking every other month or every third month for a working session, but I'm just pie in the sky. Let's see how this one goes. I'd like to see this work, and then I'll be better informed for myself to talk about it on November 6th, the frequency of the working sessions.
Right.
Okay? All right.
Great. Do you want to talk about some of the other materials that I provided for you?
Yeah, let's just go through the
Yeah.
book if you don't
Absolutely.
mind.
So I thought it would be helpful to review some things and talk about some of the like the variance criteria, for example. So to start, what I did is I made copies for you of these are the attachments to the zoning ordinance, and these are use tables and also dimensional requirements. And I thought it was a good way to illustrate the difference between use regulations, which we sometimes talk about, and dimensional regulations, like setbacks. There's two charts for each category of zoning district that exists in the village, which is residential, commercial, and industrial. And you can see, for example, it starts with attachment 2. It lists all the residential districts and every use that's contemplated in the village. A P indicates that it's a permitted use, so those are uses that people sometimes describe as being allowed as of right. An X is a prohibited use, something that's not allowed in that district. And where you might be most familiar are ones that say SE, which is special exception. So special exception are uses that are permitted in that district if certain criteria are met. And it's this board's jurisdiction to determine if the criteria are met. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is a handy reference guide to talk about which uses are some uses that are permitted in one district are obviously prohibited in another. Some that are prohibited may be a special exception in a different district. So you have, for your review,
So-
the complete
so-
list there.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
Alex, I just want to make sure I'm clear. So the first 2 pages are use regulations in residential districts.
Yes.
And the next 2 pages are dimensional regulations in those residential districts.
Yep, exactly.
And then
And
we
so you'll
swing-
notice there's requirements that have to do with the lot, for example. So lots have minimum size. They also might have some minimum dimensions, like lots have to have a certain width. And then the rest of the requirements apply to buildings. So buildings have to be certain setbacks from streets, from side, from rear lot lines. You'll notice on the residential page, a lot of that is blank because it's regulated by a separate section of code. And at the end of this section, there's a worksheet that says principal building setbacks that comes from the section of code with a more detailed table.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
You completely lost me, so
Sorry.
let me go to the remedial course. Okay, the first 2 pages, like I said, is just use regulations for residents.
Yep.
Dimensional is the next 2 pages are residents again, but those are dimensional, without going to the next page.
Yep.
And then we swing into business district
Yep.
use regulation, 2 pages worth. And then we swing into business district dimensional regulations. So we have residence, use and dimension, business use and dimension.
Yep.
Okay, now,
And then last one's industrial, yes?
and then industrial.
Yeah. mhm.
Right,
There's a small part of the village that's zoned for light industry, LI.
okay. And then what was the last part you were just
So
saying?
the
'Cause you
last
lost me on
part,
that.
if you flip to the page, it says principal building setbacks.
Okay, hold on, let me catch
Yep.
up with you there, because I need to learn this. Got it, yeah, oh,
Yeah.
yes, I was looking at the,
Yeah, so this is a
Hold on, let me make
worksheet
sure
that we
everyone's
give
there.
out.
principal.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yep, so this is in the code in 116.11.1.
These are
And-
what we call building setbacks.
Yeah, building
Populated
setbacks, yeah.
mass.
And it's differentiated between a principal building, which is the main building, which is typically the residence, and accessory
Accessory.
buildings, which might be a pool house, a shed, a garage, detached garage, something like that. So this is a little bit more detailed because these setbacks also depend on the lot size. It's a sliding scale, so it's a little bit more information that can fit in those previous tables. But you'll also see there's dimensions below that are for the zoning district. So each zoning district basically has a floor, but then also every lot size has a sliding scale depending on how big the lot is.
Okay, so I had a question on this page,
Yes.
so if I can stop you.
Please.
So I get the first two charts on this page. They go from lot sizes of less than 7,499 to those 80,000 or greater. And they give you everything you'd want to know, front, side, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
I get those two. So if I'm in a house, a property that's 20,000 to 40,000, it's going to be a 40-foot front yard setback, top right corner. I get that.
Yep.
What is that little box at the bottom that says front colons asterisk C reverse? What is that again?
Okay, so there's a little asterisk there that have to do with the side minimum for one. And you'll see in the top chart, those four numbers, 10, 12, 15, 20, all have an asterisk.
Yes.
And that's because there's another section of code that applies that's sometimes called the 4/10 rule, and that's what's on the back. So even though there is a minimum requirement there, you can think of that as like the floor, the bare minimum. The actual minimum may be higher because it's based on a percentage of the lot width.
So what is the chart at the bottom doing where it says dimension 80, 80, 60, 40, 30, 25? What is
So
that doing?
those are minimums for, I think that's, sorry, it's front, it's a little bit cut off. That's also the floor, the minimum front yard setback for that zoning district.
Minimum.
So even though the setbacks are somewhat depending on the lot size, for example, in R120, the minimum setback is going to be 80.
Oh, regardless of the size of the
Yeah.
lot set forth above in the first
Exactly.
two.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So let's say
this
you-
trumps the above.
Yes. The stricter one will always apply.
Yeah.
Stricter.
Okay.
Yeah.
You get it? Okay.
So, for example, if
Kind
you
of.
had a small lot in R80, based on the table above, it may look like you have a small front setback, but it can't be less than 80.
Okay.
Minimum setback.
So working that through, if I've got a lot that is less than 7,499, the very first column in the top chart, okay? The front yard setback, it says, should be 25 feet. But if I go down here and that lot happens to be in R120,
It's 80.
are you saying that that front yard setback should be 80, not 25?
Right.
I got it.
The stricter standard will always apply.
Okay, and on the back is the 4/10 rule that gets me to that 80?
So the 4/10 rule only applies to side yards.
Oh, thank you.
That's where it's, see.
Yep, so only
Oh,
where
yeah.
you have those asterisks. And it's only side yards on the top part of the chart for properties R40 and below. It's only on the smaller lots that you have that 4/10 rule.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Oh, I'm with you. Got it. Okay, that's making sense with further study. Okay, and then the same drill then on accessory building on the next page is
Yep.
the top two charts.
Exactly. Accessory
chart below,
buildings,
which is
right.
gonna
Also
trump
a
the top.
sliding scale. Accessory buildings typically have to be set back farther from the street than a primary building because that's traditionally how buildings are situated in the village. They're typically allowed much closer to rear and side yards than primary buildings. So you have a different envelope based on this here.
And classic accessory buildings are?
Like a detached
Pools,
garage, a pool
garage.
house. Pools are separate because they have their own setbacks. So for this purposes of this table, it doesn't include pools or playing courts that we'll talk about later, things that are
Sure.
regulated separately.
But it would be the garage, the shed,
Yes,
that
things
sort
like
of
that.
thing. A
Right.
pool house. Would a pool house be part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
A pool house is a type of accessory building, exactly.
Okay.
And what you also have on here, which is a little bit new when this was adopted, is something called the green space minimum, which is the percentage of the lot that has to be green space, which is defined as grass, landscaping, or other natural materials. So the larger
So
the
not
lot.
cement.
So not cement, exactly.
Now, I understand from, usage that there are rules for green space. In other words, if you have a solid terrace, that's not green space.
Right.
But if you have the different tiles and there's grass in between, that's green space. Where is all that? Is that in the code?
Yes, so I didn't print all of that out here, but
But
that's
it's
in
in
the
there.
text of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
The only exception is if you have a driveway sometimes called geoblock, where you see that it has grass grows through it, that you get 50% credit for the green space requirement.
Okay.
So that's to encourage people to have that type of driveway, and because grass partially goes through it, it's counted partially.
50%.
50%, that's right.
Okay.
That's separate and apart from other requirements that you might be familiar with, like lot coverage, which has to do with the amount of structures that are on the property, and gross floor area, or GFA, which has to do with the size of those structures and the massing.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Okay. Oh, that's helpful. Great. Okay.
So the next section, so there's two guides here that are really helpful references. Won't go through all of them, but they're published by the New York State Department of State, their local government. The first is guidelines for applicants to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So it's pretty short, and it's just information for residents that are applying to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And what's helpful is that on page 4, it outlines in a pretty clear way the 5-point test for an area variance. So an area variance being any request that has to modify any of those setbacks we're talking about, any dimension or anything like that.
Okay.
So if you flip where it says page 4 of that first document, you can see at the bottom where it says what must be proven in order to be granted an area variance. So these criteria are set by New York State. They're the same in every municipality. And this is what they call that that balancing test, or the 5 things you take into consideration when granting an area variance.
Can,
That's what we've been doing, though.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. This
So-
is just a guide to that.
that's what I want to talk about for a moment here. So the area variance 5-factor test we use constantly, right? Change the character of the neighborhood. Another method could achieve it without that variance. Whether it is a substantial variance, whether it will have an adverse effect on the neighborhood or district, and whether it's self-created.
Right.
Done. Up above on page 4, though, it talks about a use variance. And these we don't see very often.
Correct.
Why and how are these working?
So a use variance would be a variance from any of those use tables that we went
Right,
forward.
not residential, but something
Right.
else.
So that's like if you were looking to do a commercial use in a residential district that doesn't allow commercial uses. It's a very rare type of application with an incredibly high standard. And in over 10 years of practice, I can probably count on one hand the amount of cases that I've seen or approved. They're uncommon for a reason, because most uses comply with the zoning ordinance, especially new uses.
I think we may be coming into one about use. Not to get into details, but I think something will be coming up in it regarding use.
Yep. So there are cases, and we'll talk about those later because I have some information on what's called non-conforming uses.
Right.
That's separate and apart from a use variance.
Right.
A use variance is like a brand new use wants to come into a property, to a zoning district. That use is not
So
allowed.
if I want to put a gas station in a residential district or a
Right.
nightclub in a residential district, as opposed to what he's talking about.
Like a retail, something retail where it's not professional, not an accounting office or a bank
Yeah.
or something like
Right.
that.
It depends. That could be a use variance if you have a property in an office district that doesn't allow for retail, and a
Right.
new retail use wants to move in.
Right.
They could apply for a use variance if they could meet those. They could apply, and then it would be up to the board to determine if those criteria are met. Use variances are meant to be very rare, and only in cases where the property can't generate any economic return by the allowable uses, and that's why it's a very high threshold that's hard to meet.
So Alex, let's go through these just for the moment. I know they're rare, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on them, but I just hit upon these in my reading, and I wanted to get some clarity. The first one is what you just said, incapable of earning a reasonable return if you use the allowed uses. I get that. That goes without saying. I get that. It says number 2, there's highly uncommon circumstances that affect this. All right, whatever that is. Number 3, the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood, and 4, it's not self-created. Can you give us any examples of something that is so unique or at least highly uncommon as to hit this level on prior cases? Do any come to mind, or can you make anything up hypothetically that would give us a flavor for what we're looking for?
Something you might arise to that would be like if there's a unique environmental condition on the property that really only affects that one property, like topography or wetlands, things like that generally affect a lot of properties, so that's probably not the best example, but something like a really unique shape, for example, could be something that's very unique that only affects that particular lot.
Because the other the other criteria are pretty straightforward. I just didn't know what that one meant.
Right.
Thank you.
Or it could be just a part of the village that's very unique and doesn't follow the pattern of the rest of the zoning where there's,
Okay.
other circumstances that are special.
Now, could we go back to the area variance standards for a moment, the 5 standards? And there's one that has come up on numerous occasions, and that is number 4, that the Brian?
Sorry.
Okay, that the proposed variance will have, and I'm going to use a couple of the words selectively on purpose, adverse effect in the neighborhood. Now, I can have 8 neighbors walk through the door and say to me, this has an adverse effect on my property. And they could all get together as a class. And there could be 9 homes on a street. And 8 people will come in as a group and say, what he wants to do has an adverse effect on this entire block. Is that what we're talking about here?
So I think that is actually the first criteria when you talk about an undesirable be changed on the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties.
Yeah.
Number 4 is specific to environmental conditions.
Oh.
So it's related, but I think what you're
Oh,
asking
I thought
about.
that or environmental conditions moved it out of, made environmental more unique. That modified, the entire 4 is environmental.
Well, it's physical or environmental conditions.
Right, so they're saying this would affect the physical conditions of my neighborhood.
Right, okay.
Won't affect the environment, but boy, it'll affect the physical conditions of my neighborhood. So is that the kind of communication we could get that would trigger number 4?
Yeah, I mean, the board is always required to consider public input as it relates to the criteria. So if neighbors have something to say about what's an undesirable change, how the character of the neighborhood is defined, what's considered a detriment to nearby properties, or what's an adverse effect on the physical conditions of the neighborhood, those
We
are all
can
things
consider
you have
those. Okay.
to consider.
So let me move from number 4 then to number 1, which is where you just were. What if those same 8 neighbors came in and neighbor number 9 is proposing something and those 8 neighbors all said the same thing, which is this is going to create an undesirable change, this is going to be a detriment to my property. That's all they said. It's a detriment to my nearby property. That clause. It won't change the character of the neighborhood. It won't, whatever. It won't do all the other things. It'll just hurt my property. If every one of them around this property come in and say, it's going to hurt my property, that's what this is talking about, correct?
Yes, and
Right.
you would take that into consideration when you're making that determination about the first point, and then as you know, you balance all of the considerations against one
Right,
another
right.
in context and weigh the benefit to the owner against
Right.
any adverse impact to the community.
So
Can I add something?
please.
So what you're talking about, if everybody comes in and just says the detriment, it's detrimental to my property, that's not sufficient to consider. That is considered essentially just a generalized objection. If they are going to say it's a detriment, they have to identify some form of detriment for it to be some
Oh,
kind of
I'm
factor.
assuming they do that. I'm
So
sorry.
then what do you mean, provide proof? Show proof, like if, should you do this?
Or noise.
Whatever
It
that may be.
doesn't have to be
and-
scientific data.
Something.
It could be identifying factual information.
Yeah. For example, the equipment is too close to my property. I'm going to hear it every single day as I sit in my lawn. Or it's going to be so loud I can't sit in my backyard. Or those, as long as they identify something specific and they say this is a detriment to my property, right? That rises to the level where we can consider it, correct?
And they should say, if they're talking about their backyard, where their backyard is in relation to it, and then you
Yeah.
can assess it and give it, whatever weight you'd like to give it.
Now, let me put these 2 together, number 1 and number 4. I had a plot. Same neighbors get up, they have the same factual basis for the same objection, and they say under number 1, it's a detriment to my property, this noise, this smell, this whatever it is, and they say it's going to have an effect on the physical condition of my neighborhood. So we can apply the same complaint to multiple factors. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because that affects how many factors come into play. All right,
Oh, yeah.
thank you.
I mean, substantiality is in that, it falls within that
True.
ambit.
Yeah.
If you want to look at it that way, you can as well, because you're not just looking at numbers from a substantiality consideration.
Okay. All right. And when we issue this is one for council probably, but Alex, I'm sure you have a view because you have experience. When we provide an opinion based on these 5 factors, which we've done time and time again, do we need or should we, or is it a good idea or not, to put on the record the reasons behind our view as to why some, if any, of these factors apply to our decision?
Anything that's not in the record can't be considered. So think of it that way. If something you're thinking about, do not hold off until you're deliberating after the hearing's been closed. One of the reasons why we as a board do some deliberation during the hearing before closing it is to make sure that that information does get out there and is identified, because what it does, it provides the applicant with an opportunity to respond.
Absolutely, right. Okay, I'll just leave it at that for now. Okay, thanks. Other comments on this? Sorry, I sort of hogged the space, but
No, that's great.
it's a really common one, so.
Yeah, and then so
What else?
you mentioned the others, whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method which would be feasible for the applicant to pursue, but would not require a variance. So that's sometimes called the alternatives test, right? So is there another way that you could achieve the same benefit in a way that conforms with the code? And there may be reasons why they could, but those would be not feasible. So like it would involve environmental degradation, or doesn't work for the property.
What about
or-
expense?
I mean, that's something that you have to take into consideration in terms of what's feasible and what's reasonable. If complying with the code meant picking up an entire house to move it over, you might say that that's really not feasible because of the great expense that would be required.
Okay, so Brian, we're going to need I'd appreciate some legal guidance on this, because this is coming up. And that is, let's say there are 10 code provisions out there, and people want to violate every single one of the 10 because it would be nice to have their yard with this bigger pool or this bigger house, or you make it up, whatever it might be. But the only reason that they can give is it'd be too expensive to do it otherwise. All 10 of them. They want to violate all 10 codes, and the reason is it'd be too expensive if I didn't get to violate each individual code section. Does that mean we are compelled, and it's a substantial expense, are we compelled to approve that because it is not feasible for them to take on that huge expense?
Feasibility is just one of the 5 factors. So when you're considering it, if somebody does, we had this 2 weeks ago on the Edwards Lane case.
Yeah.
Feasibility is just one issue. So if in fact you'd make a determination that for monetary reasons or other reasons, the benefit that the applicant seeks is not achievable in any feasible way, you can make that determination and still deny the application on the other considerations.
Okay, so if we think it would be a detriment to the neighborhood, or the neighbors have all these concerns, whatever, the other concerns can outweigh the economic reality of what they're being asked to do to make it otherwise possible. Okay.
Otherwise, you guys wouldn't have to meet once a month. You wouldn't have to meet at all.
Right.
That's where I was
every
going.
guy's
Yeah,
connected.
That's
can
where
I
I'm
bring up
going.
one?
Please.
So, when is it? When are we? All the cases maybe I'm the newest one here, but when is it not self-created?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Like
question.
point number 5
Yeah.
is, to me, it's an instant veto. I mean, yes, you have to. There's 4 other things to measure here, and some of it's subjective, and therefore it's difficult. But anybody that comes in here with their pool problems or their garage problems or their adding a new closet.
They bought the property knowing.
So any of these things that they're asking for, and we can counter, we can say to them, whatever that might be. Every time it's a request, when are they not self-created? When is it a situation where they're not coming in here with some sort of, I'm coming in here because I'm out of bounds, and I want to do something. I want to put in that stick dock, or I want to put in the expanded kitchen that's going off into the side yard setback, whatever that might be. When is that not self-created? When is the 5 not flagged?
Do you want me to
So-
answer
And again,
that,
I
or
would
do
just
you
love
want
to
Go
know,
ahead.
because you've seen all these cases, you've seen so many.
Yeah.
When is it, and again, I'm sure some of it may be so Captain Obvious that I'm missing it, but I haven't seen it yet, where something isn't a self-created issue.
So I would say the only circumstance I've seen that's not self-created is where somebody has a structure in place and that structure gets destroyed. And as a result of it being destroyed, there's an application to come in and rebuild exactly what was there, and they need a variance for that.
Okay.
That could be not that there's arguments both on both sides on that, and that
That's
could be
self-created.
considered to be not self-created.
Right. Another
No,
thing.
because it is self-created, because they could build the structure that doesn't require a variance.
Yeah, I mean that's you'd
Well,
have to
not
look
to
at that.
replace one that existed if
And
it
that's
was
feasi-
like a garage.
There's no law that says you get to replace what existed,
Well, there's pre-existing non-conforming, right?
but it's gone.
But it's gone.
It's no
I
longer
did-
pre-existing. and
Don't you
doesn't
think you
exist.
pre-existing is, let's say the garage gets taken out in a hurricane.
Brian, and
Would
Alice,
you,
is that
would you
sti-
deny them to rebuild the garage?
is the non-existent garage that was non-conforming and pre-existing, is it still a non-conforming pre-existing garage that doesn't exist, giving them a right to rebuild it as a pre-existing non-conforming garage?
That is regulated in the next section that we'll talk about,
Okay,
called
good.
non-conforming
That's
uses.
right. That's what I was
And
saying.
because
That's a
the
layup.
answer is going to be different in every
Yeah.
municipality potentially. But what I'll say about the self-created is one, it's one consideration of many, so that even if you fail that test, it's not determinative, which we know.
Yes.
And the other is, remember that it says not whether the variance is self-created, because everybody is coming in because they're proposing to do something. It's whether the alleged difficulty. So what is the difficulty in complying with the ordinance? So if you can't comply with the ordinance because your lot is incredibly narrow, that's probably not a condition that you created. If you bought a large property and you subdivided it and you build all of the houses, and then you come in and say, well, I can't actually fit what I want to do on these, that might be a clear case where you created that. But if you've inherited an existing lot with an existing house, and maybe you have some unique conditions on that are making the property difficult to build on those conditions are part of what's causing the alleged difficulty, and those factors may not be necessarily self-created.
So
That's another way to think about it.
Let me dive into that a little bit. One of the residents here objecting to another person's proposal, which it doesn't matter what the facts are, just hypothetically, he got up and he said, hey, not everybody gets to have a pool. If you buy a small lot, you don't get to have a pool. So his argument was, this is self-created.
Yeah.
So how does that jive with what you just said, which is, well, I inherited this or I bought this and it just happened to be narrow, not my fault. I want a variance to put this larger edifice or pool in. That's kind of self-created if you listen to what that resident was saying.
Well, it depends on what you think about it. I mean, and there's more information on this in the other document, that it's impossible for you as a property owner to predict every future use and need that you might have. So, just buying a property doesn't necessarily mean that you've created the difficulty. But if the difficulty is being created by, and it depends on what the factors are, is it the shape of the lot? Is it the terrain? Is it...
Let's say it's any of those.
Right.
Let's say it's any of those, but you just want the Taj Mahal. And that's what you want. And this property's not big enough for the Taj Mahal. Do you have a right to the Taj Mahal? And if you don't, it's not self-created and we have to give you an exemption to build up to all four corners of that property line under
Well-
the fifth factor alone.
Well, no. But the
Why?
factors that make it difficult are not always in the control of the applicant. That's just what I'm trying to point
In
out.
the control of the applicant.
You may not know everything you're buying, right? Brian, like, are you
Yeah,
going
in
there?
that regard, if every buyer, every purchaser of a piece of property is presumed to know the zoning code. I think we know nobody knows
Nobody
the
knows
zoning
the
code. But you're presumed to know the zoning code. So you have constructive notice of the zoning code when you buy a piece of property. So you can't use that as self-created. What you can use, though, let me expand on what I was saying before, too, because there's some other circumstances as I think about it. Let's say your roadway is part of it's taken by eminent domain. So your frontage now, or your front yard setback, which when you bought the house was 30 feet and compliant, and the village decides to take 10 feet of that roadway, or 10 feet of your property for road improvements, and now your setback is 20 feet,
Oh, that's
and you
not
want to do
self-created.
something
Okay.
there,
All
that's
right.
not self-created.
That's a
Same
good
with
one.
Wetlands expanding.
That will never
and,
happen, but that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's an example.
well,
of-
it can happen. You have a lot of it on waterfront property,
Right.
where
Yeah. Oh,
a
okay.
DEC acquires, or where
Yeah.
wetlands that become enlarged.
Or erosion is a good example. Dunes move.
That's a good idea.
That we have a dune setback.
Yeah.
Dune. That's just a force of nature. That might not necessarily be a self-created
That's true.
hardship.
That's
So
true.
forces of nature then, definitely impact
5.
number 5.
Or code change. If
Or
there's
code
no-
change.
if there's code
After
change,
you
you
vote.
And
vote
municipal
for X.
actions like
Right.
eminent domain, that was a good one.
Right. Okay. Now, all right. So
right,
a
we're in
lot
the
of the
zone
time,
board.
That's
we're-
good.
Code
That's-
change, I would disagree. Code change is, once it's in place, if you haven't already started your progress, if you haven't moved forward and you're later bringing an application a year after that code change, SOL.
Well, I think what we're
that's
referring
true.
to is
That was that
is
couple
something
that was
that
here.
did comply, and then a code change made it out of compliance, and that might make it difficult to do an expansion, or it might limit your options if there's a code change that renders something non-conforming, which we'll talk about later. That might be an example.
Okay.
But everything is going to be fact specific.
All right.
And then to address some of the other things we talked about, which are on this page, the minimum variance necessary. So something to keep in mind is that the zoning board, you can impose reasonable conditions on an application. If you think it's approvable, if certain things are done, you can require that those be part of it. And you can also, you don't have
Can we
to.
talk about that?
Okay, so let's talk
So
about that first.
is this the following example which came up, which is, I'm going to make a gross generalizations because I don't want to talk about any specific cases, but, okay, we'll allow you to build a pool a foot closer to the road for all these special reasons, but you must put in a double hedgerow because we don't want people on the street to see your pool. That hedge idea, it's not within our power technically, but that's one of the special conditions we can impose to give that variance. Is that what you're talking about?
If it's reasonable and
Yeah.
it's related to the impact
Yeah.
that it's going to have.
Right.
So if you think that, condition number 1 could be ameliorated, that it would have less of an effect because you could put in these
Well, that's
trees.
what happened here.
Yeah, that could be a reasonable condition that you could say relates to
Okay.
the criteria. That's something that you've weighed into the balancing test.
But something that would not be appropriate, without giving cases away, we can't redesign the house. We can't say, take the second story off, take the first story off, build higher, that's really the ARB's province or someone else's. We're not architects and we're not here to look at the plans and rebuild the house. Is that correct?
Well, it's a little speculative because a lot of what comes in front of this board does have to do with size and mass.
Oh,
So those
that's
are
true.
things that fall under your jurisdiction. Architectural design, like colors, materials, things like that, tend to fall under the jurisdiction.
windows.
Right, the style of windows and things like that.
I mean, I've heard discussions of, well, why did you make it so steep? Why don't you have windows? And why is, all these aesthetics go into it. I get nervous because I'm like, well, that's not really where we need to be going.
Well,
here.
right, and I would say focus on those criteria.
Yeah.
So like things that just have to do with just general aesthetics would typically fall within the architecture review board. But if there's ways in design that you think address the criteria, you could consider those as part
Yeah,
of your
but
review.
you could open up a large door by saying the following, I'm asking you to do the following things because they would take care to protect the character of the neighborhood. So I want you to get rid of your second story. I want you to not have a wide driveway. I want an 8-foot driveway. I don't want you to have a bike ride. I don't know. I'm making this up. But, you could really go to town on a resident under the theory that is to protect the character of the neighborhood in exchange for a variance.
Well, what you know about most all of the applications that come to you is their next step is typically the Board of Architectural Review, and they're going to be looking within what's in their jurisdiction, which is that it's harmonious with the design of the neighborhood. So sometimes it's helpful to focus on the size, dimensions, and massing, which are typically zoning concerns. What's the setback? What's the height? What's the pyramid line? And then leave the other details that are within
Right,
the jurisdiction
okay.
of that board to that
That's
board.
exactly where I wanted to land on this because I'm always painfully aware that if we get into too much design and we don't stick with the factors you're talking about, that we're just going to get reversed by the ARB. And then the poor resident comes to us and they get one bit of information. They go to another board, they get another one, then they have to come back to us to get the variance reapproved. This is awkward. We need to stay out of the ARB business. Right?
Yeah, well, right.
Plus, it's arbitrary.
And it's very arbitrary.
Well,
And
every
ours is not.
Yeah.
Right.
Ours is very black and white.
Yeah, well, every application has to get approved by both boards, and there are rare cases
Right, but
where the
if we-
boards are
if
in
we get-
conflict with one another. But those are
Yeah,
things
if
we
we
try
get
to
too much
address.
into care to protect the character of the neighborhood by telling someone to redesign certain aspects of their house, That's going
We
too
had a
far.
little bit. I mean, like again, keep the cases, but we were talking about roof lines and shapes.
Yes.
To accomplish certain things.
Yep.
And that I was like, oh my gosh,
I get
are we
really nervous.
qualified
That's when I
to-
start to get quiet and nervous.
Yeah, because we're opening up Pandora. Are we opening up Pandora's box by saying, okay, you make prudent points, but this, again, we'll get into the word precedent, and but all of a sudden we're starting to play this game where we're agreeing or
ARB.
not, or suggesting, oh yeah, well you keep going in this direction, change the slope to this, or maybe you need to widen this plane so you can accomplish X. And I go, wait a second, is that what we're? Should we even engage
No.
in that way?
I say,
Well, it depends on what the code and the variance they're asking for, right? Because we have pyramid law in the village that does regulate the steepness of the roof and the height and planes and things like that.
but I've never seen a request for a variance from the pyramid law.
It's happened occasionally, yeah. We've had cases
but I haven't
for it.
seen it. The cases we're talking about weren't
I
that.
did with my property. I did.
Yeah, but I'm just saying we haven't seen a case like that.
We have not, not yet.
So our discomfort with those kinds of conversation hasn't been the easy case where it's about the mass, the angle, and so on, because that is zoning board type stuff. It's about other stuff that's a bit softer.
Yeah. I mean, there are some cases, and it depends on the nature of them, that benefit from primary review by the Architectural Review Board. So, for example, if you're talking about a contributing building in the historic district, that might go to that board first to get at least some kind of feedback about whether the type of addition they're doing is appropriate before it comes to those boards. So if there is an issue where there's conflict, sometimes we schedule the hearings in a way that they
different
can't, right. And then there's opportunities where the boards can request opinions from one another. So there's ways that we can try to address that where the boards feel like they might have some overlapping jurisdiction.
On that note, I'm particularly cognizant of the cell tower. And when they come in, I'd like to talk to you off the record, because it's a waste of time here, but about going to the ARB first, about the fence, those big side walls they're putting in and so on and so forth. That's not really our province, and I'd rather that all get decided first and they come into us just for the pure variance issues. It would
Right.
make it clearer than if that wasn't resolved.
Understood. Yeah, every board tends to want to go last. They want all
Oh,
the other
really?
reserves. So,
We always go first.
Mostly. But yeah, it's something that we talk about on a case-by-case basis, depending on
Yeah.
what makes the
We
most
should talk
sense.
about
And
that.
then we try and have the applicant really target what falls within the jurisdiction of each particular board.
Right. That's why I think we need to stay out of their work. Brian, did we interrupt you? Sorry, or prevent you?
Sorry, I'm coughing a lot for some reason. I don't know. It's in Colorado, the air is supposed to be cleaner, but I'm not so sure about that.
It's just your lungs aren't used to it.
It's all that fresh air.
It could be my daughter's apartment that she just doesn't clean the vents. So I guess that's one of my jobs this week.
All right.
So 2 things I just want to touch on before we move on from this. Which touches on the question that you asked for, is must the variance, if granted, be exactly what was applied for by the applicant? So that goes back to the minimum necessary relief. So if somebody is asking for multiple requests, it's not necessarily a yes or no. It can be partly yes and partly no. And if somebody asks for a variance, you don't have to grant the full extent of that variance
Yeah.
if you don't feel like that's necessary or appropriate and doesn't meet the criteria.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that it's not necessarily a binary.
It's not an all or nothing proposition.
Right, exactly. So you take all of each thing into consideration. And then the last part here is, we talked about this before, is if there's no opposition, does it have to be approved? And it says here that the public is entitled to speak in favor, against a proposed project, but opinions in and of themselves are not enough.
Right. Okay.
And then the next document here is, this is a guide to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And if you just open up the table of contents here, it goes into all the things we talked about in much more detail. And there's some case history there and some examples. So this is just a helpful document to keep handy if you had questions about any of the criteria
this
and
is
how
the-
they're interpreted.
I think this is the first training we had.
Yeah, I typically give this out to all zoning board members. It's
Oh, okay.
it's
Well, that's what it
yeah,
was.
it's a really good guide.
It is.
Yeah, it goes through
And this
those.
is the most current. Right? Or
Yep.
we
mhm.
print this one?
Yep. This came right from the state website. And so this, if you had more questions about the use variance, this goes into what that dollars and cents proof was, and it talks about more details about the self-created difficulty. How do you consider the impact on the environment, things like that.
Okay.
So the next section So I printed out some code for you, so I thought it would be helpful to talk about those special exception uses. We don't get too many of those, but those are anything on
But they're
that
coming
use
up.
table, and that they could
They're
happen.
coming up
yeah.
on our agenda.
Exactly. So this is something that's not regulated by state law. This is something unique to the village. So the village establishes for every special exception use what's called general standards. And every application would come to this board, and these are the conditions that have to be met for this to be an approvable use. And so these general ones, A through N, apply to all uses, and you have to meet all of these. This one, unlike the use that's the variance, which is a balancing test of multiple factors that are weighted differently, this it has to be. You have to meet all of the check boxes in order to get the special exception. If you don't meet one of the criteria, that could be grounds for denial, or what's sometimes you could ask for a variance from one of these standards if the standard is something that can't be met.
So A through M,
A through N, yes.
so that's that's a high bar.
It is, but you'll see that a lot of these are very general, like it has to be in harmony with the intent of the zoning ordinance, or that you have enough lot area to do what you want to do.
Right.
So the presumption...
Logical.
Yeah, so a special, right, they all are pretty self-explanatory, and the special exception use, a lot of them exist in that zoning district, and they're permissible as long as they meet this criteria, and it's your job to determine whether these criteria are met. And the next page is, so these are special conditions for certain uses. So there's certain uses that are outlined in the code that above and beyond the general ones, which again all have to be met, all of these have to be met for that use. And they're very specific to particular uses because it notes that certain uses may have specific types of impacts. So some of these will probably have never come up in years, other than those you've seen before. Outdoor dining is an example of one that's come to this board before, where there's specific standards for outdoor dining that have to do with no outdoor speakers, limitations on number of seats, things like that. But there's also everything here from, colleges, restaurants are probably the most common example of a special exception use that would come to this board if a new restaurant were to open. And there's some specific criteria there. For example, there may be some uses that have lot size requirements that are larger than what what would otherwise be required for that zoning district. So this board would review whether those special criteria could be met.
So for example, with a recent hotel application that we're dealing with on Hill Street, subsection 14, page, sorry, I don't have the page here, but 14A through E, those had to be met.
No, because the application you're talking about was not a transient hotel as defined in this section.
The word transient modifies both hotel and motel?
Correct.
This is poorly drafted.
It's a little confusing.
Yeah.
So that application was what's
It's
called
just a run-on list. It is. Those commas are simply, sorry, Brian, we're legal drafting here, but that's not right.
So that application
Thank you.
is a resort hotel.
Yeah, no.
And
okay.
that is not a special exception use that comes to this board. It's a special permit that's issued by the Board of Trustees.
Hence the Board of Trustee involvement at the
Correct.
outset. Okay.
There's a couple of uses,
But transient modifies both hotel and motel here, so really, we're
Yeah.
not going to, okay.
but if a new hotel were to open up in the village that met the definition of a hotel in the definition section, it would have to come to this board for the special exception approval, and it would have to meet all the general standards and these 14A
Oh, wait a minute. So
through E.
there's a resort hotel set of rules
and a transient
and
hotel.
a regular, I'll call regular
What
hotel.
qualifies as a resort hotel?
It's
That's where I'm going. I'm like, wait a minute.
the resort hotel is designed to be a more long-term stay, and it also requires workforce housing be provided on site. It's a unique part of the code.
Is there a I'm not trying to be difficult. I just want to figure out where my footing is here. Is there a definition of transient hotel in the code?
Yes,
There is a definition. And is there a definition of resort hotel?
there is.
Okay, they're defined in the code. We just don't have the definition in front
Can't
of
wait
us.
to read it.
Yeah, I know. That's going to be exciting.
It probably
Have a drink.
doesn't come up that often, but yes. And you also may, for example, 21 tavern, bar, or restaurant. That's one that you'll probably see more often.
Yeah.
Outdoor dining, number 25. That's
No, wait a minute.
something-
What if the... Oh, wait a minute. I thought we had a restaurant over here further, though.
We did, we had,
Yeah. Okay, I have to say this without... Well, no, we don't talk about cases, but eating establishments, number 7. Oh, it's only drive-in, open front, or curbs. Oh,
Correct.
gosh, this is written backwards. Okay, eating establishments which are drive-in, blah, blah. So that's
Correct.
as opposed to a traditional
Yeah,
restaurant.
so
which is
what you're
closed up.
talking, which is, that's 21.
Okay,
That's it.
well, that leads me to the question, though. Outdoor portion of the restaurant, where does that go?
So that's regulated partly by special exception number 25, outdoor dining as a special accessory
thank
use
you.
to an existing
There you
restaurant
go.
in the
There you
VB
go.
district.
Okay, because we need to read these, because those come up.
Yeah, so this came up recently. So those criteria A through K had to be met in addition to all the general standards.
Yeah.
And you'll know that some of those standards are numerical standards. They're not totally subjective. So if any of those numbers can't be met, they can also ask for area variances of those standards.
Ah, okay.
So that might be a combined application where you're talking about variances and special exception. You'll also note that there's some special, not every special exception is on this list. So if there are no special criteria, you would just apply the general criteria.
A through N.
Yes, exactly. These only apply specifically to the uses that are
Right.
named here.
Okay. Interesting. Helpful?
Yeah. Everything over and above A through N.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so it's always A through N, and then optionally, if any of these apply.
Okay.
So just to be clear, a automobile laundry is a car wash?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's probably what that'd be called in common parlance. Some zoning codes are notorious for having some very specific
Crazy names.
language. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Good to know.
yeah. Filling station is a gas station, things like that.
You're gonna have to change that. You're not gonna be filling it 20 years from now.
That's true. We'd be charging.
Well, we
We'll
probably
be
won't be on the board either
charged.
20 years from now. You never know.
I like it.
All right. Zoning. Non-conforming.
Okay,
Right?
so if you wanted to,
There we go.
Yep.
And
So-
abandonments in here.
yes, that's part of this as well.
And we have a case for abandonment coming up, so everyone pay attention.
Yes.
So this
specifics
first
would be on.
page here that this is a segment where it starts with microcell, is
Oh, yeah.
these are definitions. You asked about definitions before. This is some definitions from our code, and it defines a non-conforming building, a non-conforming lot, and a non-conforming use. So that's why those definitions are there. But basically, these are either buildings, lots, or uses that were legal when they were established, but laws were subsequently changed so that they are no longer permitted or that they're out of compliance. Sometimes people describe this as like a pre-existing legal non-conforming use, because if you do something that's just illegal, that's just illegal construction. These were uses that were once legal, either because they predate the law that made them illegal, they may predate the zoning ordinance entirely. Zoning didn't exist prior to 1916, so a lot of buildings and uses before that were just allowed.
So that wouldn't be self-creating.
Potentially not. So these are uses that, like I said, were legal, but because of zoning or changes or other reasons, now don't conform. Sometimes you might hear the term grandfathered in, which means the same thing, but that has some unfortunate connotations, so you don't always use that language. So non-conforming uses, buildings, and structures, there's a whole section of code here, it's 116.19 I provided for your reference, which regulates what you can do with a non-conforming use, with a non-conforming building, special rules for non-conforming lots. These are regulated in more specific ways because they are out of compliance with the zoning ordinance. So for example, when things are torn down or come down, sometimes there's limits on what percentage they can be rebuilt. There's limits on how much they can be expanded. So there's a whole section here on continuance, where things that are non-conforming are typically allowed to continue, but are regulated in how they're able to be enlarged, expanded, reconstructed, and things like that. So for example, if you have a structure like a garage that was built before the current setbacks and it's too close to the property line, you can't expand that garage in a way that's in a violation of the zoning ordinance. You could expand it if it in a way that met the setback, but you can't continue, for example, a non-conforming setback.
Unless it doesn't exceed 100% of the replacement cost.
That's a slightly different section.
C2.
Yeah, so that's talking about reconstruction or repaired.
Structurally altered, restored, repaired.
Yeah, there's another section of code here that talks about a non-conforming structure can't be, actually it's right below that in 3. Cannot be enlarged, reconstructed, altered, except that the degree of non-conformity shall not be increased.
Not be increased.
Shall not be increased.
So
Okay,
that's-
I thought the difference between 2 and 3 was 2 starts out talking about how it's a conforming building used by a non-conforming use.
Correct.
Then you have the 100% thing.
Yep.
In 3, it's a non-conforming building
Yes.
as opposed to conforming building, and it's devoted to a conforming use.
Yep, they're regulating two different things.
Right.
Yep.
So 2 and 3 are not related with one another. So 2 says, as long as I got a conforming building and I'm using it for non-conforming use, I can bang the heck out of it, renovate it, restore it, repair it, as long as I don't exceed 100% of the replacement cost of that conforming building. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe that's what it's saying there. That's specifically regulating a building used by a non-conforming use.
Right. Right. Okay. But if I have let's see, that's a conforming building we use for a non-conforming use. I can go all the way up to 100% in terms of my changes and whatever. But if I'm in a non-conforming building or structure and it's being used for a conforming use, but it's non-conforming, it was built before 1915 or for whatever reason, then I cannot increase the non-conformity. But I could put something on the lot and do something that is conforming,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yeah. So for example, if you have a non-conforming structure like a detached garage that doesn't meet the setback on one lot line but does meet the setback on a different lot line, you can expand in a way that the part that
Right.
meets the setback, you can't expand the part that doesn't meet the setback, or it would trigger an area variance from this board.
So I'm a little confused, frankly, and I gotta think this through, but earlier I could not figure it out because both of them allow you to do things where what you're doing is conforming. Like the item 2, subsection C2, talks about unless the use of the building or structure is changed to a conforming use. So I guess you could expand in a way that is conforming. It's a conforming use, okay? So I'm a little confused how these two are working logistically.
Yeah, and this second one doesn't come up. That number 2, C doesn't come up very often
Okay.
because we don't have very many non-conforming uses. What's much more common is to have a non-conforming
Building.
structure.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
mhm.
Okay. And there you can do what you want to do, but you cannot you cannot make the non-conforming element even worse. You have to do something that is conforming.
That's right.
Okay, yeah, makes complete sense. Okay.
So that's why you might
Thank
see if somebody comes to this board for a variance, there's a box on the denial letter that says notes a pre-existing condition. So they might be asking for a variance to continue a non-conforming condition or to expand it,
Right.
but they may not be getting any closer to the street or to the sideline than what's existing. That's a common type of application that you might see.
Okay, and then number 5 talks about if you have an existing building or structure, conforming use. Well, that's similar to 3. It's an existing building or structure devoted to a conforming use to that degree, but it's located on a non-conforming lot. Okay, basically you can go at it as long as the degree of non-conforming is not increased. Same idea.
Yeah. mhm.
Okay, there's a theme here.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'm getting it. Talk
Yeah.
about D though.
Extension?
Yeah. A nonconforming use cannot be enlarged or extended, nor can the degree of nonconformity be increased. Well, I expect that, except as provided in C above. That just means you have to meet everything we just talked about,
Right, exactly.
the different standards.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
thanks.
right, a non-conforming use cannot be enlarged or extended because the idea typically is that non-conforming uses, unless they get a variance from this,
Right.
are generally phased out so
Right,
that they
we're trying to
become
put a lid on it.
conforming over
Yeah,
time.
okay, okay.
Yep. And so the next section talks about change, so that a non-conforming use can only be changed to a conforming use, except, and there's another code there that you have attached, there's a special power of this board granted by the Board of Trustees that allows you to allow a change of use from a non-conforming use to a better non-conforming use
Okay,
if certain criteria are met. That's a special power that this board has under that section that I've attached for
okay.
you.
So if I have an organization, a beach club, for example, and it's an absolute non-conforming use, but, it's in a residential, it's along the beach, it's all residential, I'm making this up, all
No, it
residential.
exists on Gin Lane.
Well, that's true, but I'm not talking about that one.
Okay.
Sorry, I gotta come up, I can't think of as many
Yeah, go ahead.
hypotheticals as I
Go
need.
with it.
But, it's in a residential area, it's completely non-conforming, and the element of non-conforming is they happen to have, let's say, a pool, 3 tennis courts, and a cafe, a restaurant, right? All of that would be, those 3 things are non-conforming in a residential district. If they want to expand any of those 3, they're not allowed to under this, correct?
If it's not in the, right,
It
you
would be
can't
expanding the
enlarging or
non-conforming
extending
use.
the nonconformity.
Really?
Well,
Well,
many people are conflicted out of some of these, but isn't that going to come up?
It is, and that's why people sometimes request variances from that code.
and they also request multiple, I'm just saying, hypothetically, adjournments.
Yes,
Because we
hypothetically.
cannot agree
Yeah,
on
on them,
what we're
amongst
asking for.
themselves.
I'm just saying, because of this.
Yeah, okay.
There is a fundamental thing here. You're existing on something that is
Right.
code red. So whatever you intend to do, whatever that might be,
It's going to be
you have to
heavily
have that.
examined.
It falls here. All of it falls here.
And where that change provision might come in your example. So let's say you have this, what we're talking about is really a very commercial use in a residential area. So if that use, if they were going to sell the property and they were going to sell it to someone who wanted to do like a nursing home, that's also a commercial use that wouldn't be permitted there. But under that section, they could apply and say, this non-conforming use
Is it better?
is a much better use with much fewer impacts. It's much
Right.
closer to the intent and purpose of
In
the
a
zoning
way,
code.
home is closer to homes.
Right,
than-
exactly.
Okay,
That might be an example of where that change provision would come in, where they would apply under that specific power that you have, that 11628C,
But-
which is attached here, that you can also grant certain extensions to non-conforming uses. That's also in that next section. You do have some powers there. And that's also the section that talks about where
you-
you're changing one non-conforming use for another.
I was going to go there. So if I've got a place and it's a swim club, and I have 4 pools for different types. I have a diving pool, I've got a kiddie pool, I've got a lap pool for Olympic swimmers, all that kind of stuff. Lots and lots of pools. But now I want to come in and I want to build a youth club, or I want to come in and I want to bring in a basketball court, basketball Nike club. That's a different non-conforming use. It's not a swim club.
It depends, because that type of use, for example, would be defined in the code, and like those type of structures that you're talking about might be part of that. That gets into it gets into a little bit of confusion between like non-conforming structures and non-conforming uses. So typically for a non-conforming use, it would spell out exactly what's there and what's conforming. So what could be expanded is limited in terms of the structures can't be expanded, but it doesn't necessarily, what you're describing might not necessarily change the use.
Okay, let me put it this way. What if I have a non-conforming use for, a swimming pool, but now I want to bring in a bowling alley? That's a different non-conforming use.
Yeah, it would
Indoor, outdoor.
It would depend on how it's defined in the code.
What do you mean defined in the code?
So if the use is like a club, the uses that would be allowed in like a club, which should be defined in the code, or if it's non-conforming, should be spelled out somewhere. It's a little bit
Okay,
hypothetical.
but let's say this was a club and it was spelled out that it's a non-conforming swim club, and now they want to bring in a bowling alley. What am I missing here?
So that what you're describing would likely be considered an expansion, because you're introducing new structures and other things that are not part of that. So that's something that may trigger a variance under that section that we talked about.
Right, it's an expansion. Well, it's a different non-conforming use and a different non-conforming structure.
Right, but it may not fall under it being a better non-conforming.
No, I'm not getting into whether it's better or
Right.
worse. I'm just saying it is a different non-conforming use and different non-conforming structure.
And when I'm talking
So
about
it's got
use,
bigger hurdles to come over.
I remember I'm talking. That use table
Yeah.
that lists all those uses.
Yeah.
I don't know if something like that is changing one category of use to another. That's why I'm not sure if
use
that.
table?
So remember at the very beginning when we talked about those the zoning tables, and they've got
These
all
things.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So when we're talking about uses, what we're talking about is swapping the uses that are listed there.
Oh. So I have to go through so if any of these cases come before us, we have to go through the use table
Yeah.
to see if you're moving from one use to the next.
So
Typically,
if you've
that
got a
would-
P in one place and what you want to do is got also a P, then it's permitted. If it's got an X, it's not.
Right.
Oh,
So
okay.
if, depending on what section you're in, like R120 versus R80. Although they look kind of similar.
So wait a minute, so Alex, so, so if I'm in R120 residence, and I've got an accessory structure to do X, and there's a P beside it, permitted, I can build 500 other accessory structures that don't require variance. The setbacks are there, all that kind of stuff, but they're for different uses. But they've got P's beside them under R120. So, for example, I could open up an accommodation for not more than 2 roomers or boarders, and on that same property, the pool house I was telling you about, I could bring in a customary accessory structure. Well, forget that's a little bit different. I could do a home professional office. I could bring in a private garage for off-street parking. I could build another private swimming pool. I could put up a lot of signs consistent with, I could do all these things, even though it's a non-conforming lot. The only thing non-conforming for 500 years was a swimming club. I can load in all these other uses because they're technically permitted on that non-conforming use lot.
Right. I have to think about that one
Follow
because
what I'm
there's a
saying?
lot of hypotheticals there.
What's
Because-
bothering me is if I have like the swim club, let's say on the beach, and I've got like 5 different swimming pools, and we really want to keep it, to don't expand this non-conforming, but they start building it up with all these other things, and suddenly you've got this huge athletic complex. Well, that's not really what we're trying to do here. So let me figure this one out. Okay, never mind. I'm confused, and I'll have to get myself unconfused.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll figure it out.
those types of situations probably fall under the expansion of a non-conforming use that we talked about, where this board has special powers to
Yeah.
grant limited expansions to non-conforming uses.
Okay.
Well, when I was talking about change, that would be like, say you have an X use and you're trying to move to a different X use. And they could make an application under that provision.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
You have a non-conforming X use, and they want to expand to include another non-conforming X use.
Right. So
Pool
that's
club, Nike club, basketball court club, basketball club.
Yeah.
Two non-conforming
Would we
uses.
judge that on the 5 characteristics? Would it upset the neighborhood? Would it,
it would depend because the 5 criteria are for area variances.
Yeah.
So the part about expansion of non-conforming uses have a different set of
It's a use
criteria
variance.
potentially. It's not a use variance, but
It's non-conforming.
it would be regulated under that non-conforming
Oh,
use.
116-19.
Yes, and under the special powers that you have to regulate non-conforming uses under 11628, the specific types of variances. So, like, you can grant a permit for the extension of a non-conforming use or an increase in the degree of nonconformity. And then there's some criteria there about that you have to take into consideration.
Yep.
You can grant a permit to exceed 100%, of the gross floor area of a building or structure. You could, grant those changes.
1 second. You're saying it's 116-28, right?
Yep, specific types of variances. So this board has a couple of unique powers. I didn't print out all of them, but just specific to non-conforming uses, that's that 11628C.
Oh, I see. There shall be no change in the nature or character of such non-conforming use.
So that would be something that you'd have to determine if somebody were to make some of those applications that we talked about.
Yeah.
We have them before us.
You will.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That was very helpful and confusing, but we're going to
So,